Look around the room you are in right now. Like, literally just glance around. The chair you're sitting on, maybe the device you're listening to this on, the shoes by your door.
Yeah. And the chances are incredibly high that most of those items spent, a few weeks sitting in a steel box on a massive cargo ship.
Right, just floating in the middle of the ocean. And when we think about those vessels, I mean, we naturally imagine the threats they face as purely physical.
Like rogue waves, typhoons, piracy, that sort of thing.
Exactly. But the reality of modern global trade has fundamentally shifted. So, welcome to our deep dive. Today, we are digging into a stack of research, specifically a really fascinating brief called Anchored in Law.
It's a great piece of source material.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore how the new front line of global shipping isn't fought with steel and weather forecasts, but with compliance frameworks, digital firewalls, and geopolitical tripwires.
Yeah, the physical dangers of the ocean haven't disappeared, obviously, but they've been kind of overshadowed by this landscape of invisible risk.
Invisible risk. I like that phrasing.
Well, the source material really outlines this reality, where maritime law functions as the engine of global trade. I mean, it's the unseen structure keeping millions of tons of goods moving.
Right.
But sanctions and cyber vulnerabilities have become these massive pressure points. They're the exact spots where a, multi-trillion-dollar supply chain can just completely seize up.
So to really understand those pressure points, we have to look at the invisible boundaries that dictate where these ships are actually allowed to go. Because, I mean, a modern ultra-large crude carrier has the physical capacity to sail anywhere on the planet.
Physically, yes, but its operational reality is entirely constrained by sanctions.
So how do these legal frameworks actually stop a physical ship from moving cargo? I mean, out on the open water.
It really comes down to the commercial infrastructure that surrounds the vessel. Sanctions are basically restrictions imposed by governments or international bodies to control trade with specific nations or entities.
Like putting someone on a financial blacklist.
Exactly. And they don't usually stop a ship with a literal naval blockade. Instead, they freeze the commercial viability of the voyage itself.
Ah, okay.
So if a ship owner violates a sanction, authorities can freeze their financial assets, prohibit them from doing transactions in major currencies like the US dollar.
That's huge.
Massive. And they can ban their vessels from entering key global ports. So the sources emphasize that these aren't just high-level political guidelines. They immediately dictate who a ship owner can contract with and what specific cargo can be loaded into the hull.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I totally understand a government punishing a ship owner who deliberately smuggles illicit weapons, right?
Yeah, the blatant violations.
Yeah, but the research points out that a ship owner doesn't have to act with malicious intent to face these catastrophic consequences.
No, not at all.
Like, they could completely unknowingly breach sanctions just by carrying a container that deep down in some maze of paperwork is linked to a restricted party.
Yeah, because the burden of proof in the shipping industry falls overwhelmingly on the operators. Modern supply chains are deeply, deeply obfuscated.
How so?
Well, you might have, say, a cargo broker in Geneva, and they're chartering a vessel flagged in Panama owned by a holding company in Liberia.
Wow, okay.
Right. And it's carrying refined oil that was sold 3 different times while it was literally still in transit on the ocean.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare to track.
It is.
Mm.
But regulators increasingly expect ship owners to conduct penetrating due diligence. They have to actively monitor not just their physical vessels, but the corporate ownership structures of everyone they're dealing with.
So if an owner fails to realize that a shell company chartering their ship is actually a front for a sanctioned entity,
The financial hammer still falls.
hard. Man, that feels like an impossible standard. It's like being a driver for a gig economy delivery app.
That's a good way to look at it.
Like you pick up a sealed cardboard box from a warehouse and drive it to an address. You don't know the sender. You don't know the recipient.
You're just doing the driving.
Right. But because the person who originally paid for that delivery happens to be on a government watch list, the authorities permanently impound your personal car, green your bank account, and cancel your auto insurance.
Yep. And in maritime law, your defense of simply saying, hey, I was just moving the cargo I was hired to move, carries almost zero weight.
That is terrifying for a business owner.
It's an existential threat, meaning literal bankruptcy for a shipping company. And because of that, the industry has built these massive, highly structured systems to prevent breaches. The source material specifically highlights the role of the insurance sector here.
Right, primarily protection and indemnity clubs, or P&I clubs. Because if a ship owner goes down for a sanctions breach, The insurer is dragged right into the blast radius with them.
Exactly.
But what exactly is a P&I club? I mean, how do they enforce these rules?
So P&I clubs aren't your traditional insurance companies. They are mutual insurance associations, meaning ship owners pool their resources to insure one another against third-party liabilities.
Oh, interesting. So they're all in it together.
Basically, the major clubs operate within what you call the international group, and together they insure about 90% of the world's ocean-going tonnage.
90%. That's almost the entire global fleet.
It is, and because the risk is mutual, if one ship owner engages in reckless sanction-breaking behavior, it threatens the financial stability of the entire club.
Oh, I see, because it puts everyone's pooled money at risk.
Right. So as a result, these P&I clubs have developed incredibly sophisticated compliance frameworks. They employ massive teams of analysts and use advanced software to keep their insured members on the right side of the law.
But wait, the P&I clubs are building these frameworks based on the demands of several different global authorities, right?
Yes, multiple authorities.
Because the sources list the UN Security Council, the UK's Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation, and US regulators like the State Department and OFAC.
Yeah, OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control.
Okay, I need to challenge this setup. Because if you are a ship owner navigating the rules of the UN, the US, and the UK, aren't you essentially walking through a legal minefield?
Absolutely.
I mean, how do you comply with regimes whose geopolitical goals actively contradict each other?
It's incredibly difficult. And the friction between these overlapping jurisdictions is perhaps the most complex aspect of modern shipping. Let's look at how this conflict actually arises.
Yeah, walk me through it.
So the UN Security Council might issue a set of multilateral sanctions against a nation. That establishes a baseline. But then individual sovereign nations apply their own rules on top of that.
Like layering the rules.
Right. And the U.S. Treasury's OFAC is particularly powerful here because of the dominance of the U.S. dollar. Most global shipping contracts, fuel purchases, insurance premiums, they're all settled in dollars.
So the U.S. has a huge hook into the system.
A massive hook. OFAC utilizes what are called secondary sanctions. That means they claim jurisdiction over non-U.S. entities if their transactions even briefly touch the U.S. financial system.
Wait, really? So a European ship owner moving non-sanctioned goods between two non-U.S. countries can still face massive penalties from the U.S. government
Yes.
just because the bank transfer to pay for the fuel happened to route through a server in New York?
That is the exact reality.
Yeah.
A vessel might be operating completely legally under UN mandates and even legally under the laws of the country where the ship is registered.
Right.
But if they run afoul of OFAC's secondary sanctions, they can be entirely locked out of the global financial system. Yes, AIS is the backbone of this whole monitoring effort.
Let's get into the mechanics of AIS. Because if these massive ships are completely disconnected in the middle of the ocean, thousands of miles from a cell tower, how are regulators tracking their digital footprint in real time?
Well, AIS relies on VHF radio transceivers integrated with global navigation satellite systems like GPS.
Okay, so it's a mix of radio and satellite.
Right. Every commercial vessel over a certain size is mandated by international maritime law to broadcast continuously.
What kind of data is it broadcasting?
It automatically transmits dynamic data, like the ship's current GPS position, its speed over ground, its heading, plus static data like the vessel's unique identification number, its dimensions, and its declared destination.
So it's basically shouting its identity and location at all times.
Exactly. And this VHF signal is picked up by terrestrial receivers along coastlines, but more importantly, by networks of low Earth orbit satellites.
Okay.
This creates a continuous global digital footprint that regulators and P&I clubs monitor around the clock.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It reminds me of a commercial airliner's transponder.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Like, if a Boeing 777 is flying over the Atlantic and suddenly turns off its transponder, air traffic control immediately assumes a catastrophic mechanical failure or a hijacking.
Right. Alarms go off instantly.
But in the maritime world, if a ship turns off its AIS, the authorities assume a sanctions breach. It's almost like a digital ankle monitor for a ship. Turning it off is the maritime equivalent of sneaking out of the house in the middle of the night.
That is exactly how they view it. Disabling the AIS system, which the industry refers to as going dark, is the most severe red flag a vessel can generate.
Wow.
Regulators understand that a ship disappearing from the digital map is rarely a technical glitch. Usually, it's a deliberate attempt to conceal the vessel's movements.
So if you go dark, you're immediately under suspicion.
Completely. The P&I clubs within the international group have established strict baseline tracking standards. If a vessel disables its AIS without a heavily documented legitimate reason,
What would be a legitimate reason?
for example, trying to evade detection while transiting a known active piracy zone. But if you do it without a reason like that, the owner immediately jeopardizes their insurance coverage and their legal standing.
The sources outline a few other major red flags beyond just going dark, too. Regulators are scanning this data for sudden, unexpected route deviations, and they're particularly focused on ship-to-ship transfers.
Yes, STS transfers are heavily scrutinized.
Tell me about those. What actually happens during one?
So a ship-to-ship transfer involves two massive vessels steaming alongside each other in the open ocean. They deploy giant pneumatic fenders between their hulls so they don't crash into each other.
Yeah.
And they transfer cargo, like crude oil, through massive hoses.
That sounds incredibly dangerous just on a physical level.
It is a highly complex physical maneuver. Now, legitimate STS transfers happen frequently for normal logistical reasons, like moving oil from a massive tanker to a smaller one that can actually fit into a shallow port.
Makes sense. But obviously that's not what the regulators are worried about.
Right. Illicit actors use STS transfers in high-risk areas to mix sanctioned oil with non-sanctioned oil. It completely obfuscates the origin of the cargo.
So they dilute the illegal oil with legal oil, making it impossible to trace.
Exactly.
There's a quote from the source material that defines this entire dynamic perfectly. If you're not tracking, you're exposed.
It really sums it up.
Technology has moved from being just a helpful operational aid to being the absolute center of legal compliance. But relying entirely on a digital broadcast to prove a ship's innocence introduces a massive vulnerability, doesn't it?
A huge one. Because by solving the compliance monitoring issue with digital tracking, the industry transformed these physical assets into floating data systems.
Right.
Modern vessels are highly sophisticated IT and OT networks.
Wait, IT and OT, can you break that down for me?
Sure. IT is information technology. That's the servers managing cargo manifests, the crew's email communications, that kind of stuff.
Got it. And OT.
OT is operational technology. These are the digital systems directly controlling the physical hardware, like the electronic chart display, the ballast water management, and the actual main engine control systems.
Oh, wow. So the computers are literally driving the ship.
Exactly. And because they are integrated networks, they are highly susceptible to cyber threats.
The sources highlight ransomware attacks as a primary threat. How does that practically play out on a vessel at sea?
Well, hackers exploit a vulnerability. Say, a crew member clicks a phishing link on a bridge computer that isn't properly segmented from the OT network.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The ransomware encrypts the vessel's critical systems. Suddenly, a massive cargo ship is dead in the water. It can't safely navigate or manage its complex engine systems.
Well, a syndicate demands a massive cryptocurrency payment to unlock the software.
Exactly, it's a hostage situation. But in the context of compliance, the source text identifies an even more insidious threat: GPS spoofing.
This part blew my mind. How do you actually spoof a physical sensor? I mean, if the ship is physically in one place, how do you trick its hardware into thinking it's somewhere else?
It really just comes down to physics and signal strength.
Okay, lay some physics on me.
So the GPS satellites transmitting the location data are orbiting roughly 12,000 miles above the Earth.
That's a long way down.
Right.
Yeah.
So by the time those radio signals reach a ship's receiver antenna, they're incredibly weak.
Makes sense.
A bad actor with a relatively inexpensive localized transmitter can broadcast a counterfeit radio signal on the exact same frequency, but with a much higher signal strength.
Yeah. And the ship's receiver naturally locks onto the stronger fake signal.
Exactly. The ship's systems now believe it is located wherever the counterfeiter dictates. The AIS then dutifully broadcasts that false location to the satellites and regulators.
Wait. If the mechanics of spoofing are that accessible, could a ship owner deliberately engineer a fake cyber attack?
Like an inside job.
Yeah. Could an operator use a local transmitter to spoof their own ship's GPS, making the digital footprint show the vessel safely sailing through international waters, while physically the ship has diverted into a sanctioned port to load illegal cargo?
Yes.
So they use the cyber breach as a smokescreen to commit a sanctions violation totally undetected.
This is exactly the nightmare scenario that keeps compliance officers and regulators up at night. The overlap between cyber risk and legal risk. is absolute here.
It's the perfect crime, digitally speaking.
Whether the spoofing is an external attack by a hostile state actor
Yeah.
or an internal smokescreen orchestrated by a corrupt charterer, the result is identical. The digital truth is compromised.
Wow.
Companies can no longer treat cybersecurity and legal compliance as separate departments. If your digital tracking data cannot be trusted, your compliance framework instantly collapses.
Let's look at a specific real-world scenario from the sources to see how this complex theory plays out in a maritime court. Imagine a vessel chartered to carry oil. Mid-route, it goes dark. While the AIS is off, it conducts an illicit ship-to-ship transfer.
Okay, classic red flag behavior.
Right. Then, eventually, it turns the AIS back on. But the digital systems catch the blackout period. What is the actual structural fallout of that?
The fallout is rapid, and it is severe. First, the vessel's P&I club will immediately launch an investigation. They will often suspend insurance coverage while they review the data.
And without insurance, what happens?
Without valid P&I insurance, a ship is effectively paralyzed. It cannot legally enter almost any commercial port in the world.
So it's just stuck out there.
Completely stuck.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, regulatory bodies like OFAC or OFSI will flag the vessel.
Okay, but what happens when the ship owner steps into a legal proceeding and claims ignorance?
The I didn't know defense.
Right. If an owner sitting in a corporate office in Singapore genuinely had no idea that the captain they hired turned off the transponder and swapped the cargo, does that protect them? I mean, what does strict liability actually mean in this context?
In a strict liability framework, intent is largely irrelevant.
Irrelevant, really.
Really, the court, or the regulatory body, does not care whether the owner possessed a malicious desire to break sanctions.
Wow.
The expectation is that the owner maintains proactive, continuous, and infallible monitoring of their asset. If the vessel engaged in illicit activity, the default position is that the owner's due diligence and compliance systems were fundamentally insufficient.
So they're guilty of poor management, essentially.
Exactly.
Right.
Ignorance is not a shield. Ignorance is viewed as a failure of management. If the data shows a breach, and the owner cannot definitively prove they took every conceivable preventative measure, the fines are levied and the vessel can be detained.
So what does this all mean? That is a harsh reality. Ignorance isn't bliss. Ignorance is a crippling financial fine.
It really is.
The journey we've taken today completely reframes how we should look at global trade. We started with the physical scale of these vessels, moving millions of tons of steel and consumer goods. But shipping has evolved from a purely industrial endeavor into this high-stakes geopolitical chessboard.
Yeah, the physical realities of moving cargo across an ocean are incredibly demanding. But today, a sophisticated ransomware attack targeting an operational technology network or a sudden update to OFAC's secondary sanctions list
Can be infinitely more devastating to a shipping company than a physical storm.
Exactly.
It really puts into perspective the items sitting around your house. That laptop, that coffee mug. Every single imported product you own had to successfully navigate not just the physical ocean, but an invisible gauntlet of international sanctions.
Yep, and mathematically complex compliance frameworks and active cybersecurity threats.
It survived a legal minefield just to get to your door.
The maritime industry has had to evolve its risk management strategies at an unprecedented pace to address vulnerabilities that were literally science fiction just 20 years ago.
But it leaves us with a truly unsettling dynamic to consider. If strict liability means a ship owner is fully responsible for a breach regardless of their intent,
Right.
and GPS spoofing means the digital tracking data used to prove a ship's innocence can be easily manipulated by overpowering a radio signal, are we approaching a future where a single hacker manipulating a localized frequency from a small boat can entirely dictate the legal and financial fate of a multi-billion-dollar global shipping fleet?
It's a chilling thought. Because when data becomes the sole proof of legality, whoever controls the data controls the fleet.
Wow. Something to think about next time you see a cargo ship on the horizon. The content on the Diary of a Lawyer is provided for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice or establish a lawyer-client relationship. Any reliance on this content is at your own risk. It is not a substitute for professional advice, including legal, medical, or mental health guidance. Always seek the advice of a qualified professional regarding any specific concerns you may have.